So how do you prepare for the worst economic collapse that you may see in your lifetime? That's kind of a bold statement, but is it? I have talked to hundreds of people, and there's no one that believes we're not headed to a really bad economic collapse. Some people, some really smart economists, think this is going to be the next Great Depression. And I am one of those that believes in that because I follow the signs, I study the history, and I've studied the cycles. It doesn't matter what you believe, but what does matter is how you prepare. And that's what I want to prepare you for today. I want to get you ready for this, no matter how good, bad, or indifferent it is for you. Because no matter what, you owe this to your family, your future family that you may never even know. Because this one is the one that will turn the tides for you and everybody else. You just have to decide what side you want to be on. You can bury your head in the sand and do nothing, and you know this video will do nothing to help you. Or you can raise the flag and say, I want to prepare, I'm ready, I want this to be the largest, biggest opportunity of my life, and this video is for you. So let's dive in. The first thing you have to do is build an emergency fund. You got to have a stash of cash on hand to help you weather this financial storm, because there's going to be a lot of unexpected expenses that are going to come up. You may even lose your job or get laid off. Some things are going to happen, and you got to be ready for that. So that emergency fund that you keep pushing off, oh, we'll get there, now is the time. You got to aim to save enough to cover at least your living expenses for 3 to 6 months, no less than that. And I would probably say err on the side of caution and go 6 months. Because if this is as bad as we all think it's going to be, you may need 6 months worth of reserves. And you know what? If you don't, guess what this money gets to be? Opportunity money. This gets to become your opportunity fund if you don't need it for those unexpected living expenses. The second thing you got to really look at doing, and this is something you've heard a whole bunch of times, but you got to diversify. You got to diversify your investments. You got to diversify the asset classes that you're investing in. It's not good enough anymore just to diversify amongst a couple mutual funds in that 401k. That may be all you have available inside the 401k, but outside of that, the world is yours. So diversifying your investments can really help protect your wealth from the event of an economic downturn. It's not going to protect you 100% depending on how you diversify. I would say look at non-correlated asset classes, things that don't go down when the stock market goes down. And by the way, for all of those out there that think that crypto and Bitcoin is a non-correlated asset, Bitcoin and Ethereum were two of the most correlated asset classes going up to this point. So here's what you should do. You got to consider including a mix of different asset classes. So I mean things like stocks, bonds. You want to put some real estate, maybe some gold or precious metals in there. You also might want to reconsider what you consider your cash position. Now, I know a lot of people, when they say cash, you think bank, money in the bank. And yes, that's good for that emergency fund, but cash in the bank may not be the smartest place to keep money in an inflationary period. You might want to look at something like specially designed and engineered whole life, where it's going to give you at least a better interest rate and dividend on your money and allow your money to grow tax-free. So there's lots of other things you're going to have to look at when it comes to asset classes. It's not going to save you just to diversify among some mutual funds or some ETFs or maybe just a couple stocks and maybe you sprinkle in some bonds. When this thing lets go, they're all going to go down. So therefore, you need the ones that are going to go up. And the ones that are going to go up are the ones that your advisor and the financial companies aren't talking about because they can't make any money on them. That's right. Number 3. I say this all the time because I truly believe this is the #1 mistake most families make. We all are getting ready for this economic collapse or this economic turmoil, but a lot of people are out there increasing their debt levels. They're spending more money. They're going out to eat. They're traveling all over the place. They want to get their revenge in for all those years that they weren't able to go out during the pandemic. So they're spending a lot of money, and well, a lot of the money they're spending is going on credit cards. This is a problem. The third thing you need to do is you need to reduce your debts. If you've got a high level of debt, You are absolutely putting yourself in harm's way. You're more vulnerable to a financial shock than anyone else because the debt is going to sink you. If you lose your job, you get laid off, you can't handle your debts, that's it. It's game over. I've seen this. All of you have probably seen this. So here's what you should do. You can consider paying down your debts. Nobody likes to do this. It's not fun, but it takes a conscious effort. Your debts aren't just going to go away. You can't just get around to them someday. Especially the bad debts, like the high interest rate debts, the credit cards and things like that. You have to reduce those debts. There's no other way. Because if you don't, you will not make it through this economic collapse. And there's a lot to be said about debts. If you look back in history and you study any other recessionary or any other economic collapse type of period, debts are the number one thing that bring families down. So you might be okay with that mortgage. But you're not going to be okay with the credit cards. You're not going to be okay with the lines of credit that keep going up that you use to put that pool in, that you use to put that outside patio in, and that fancy LED lit gas stove that you put in. All of those things are going to bog you down because as interest rates go up, which they are still going up, the cost on that debt is going to keep increasing. And although you're making those minimum payments, those are not going to pay your balance off. Those are going to do nothing but make you feel like you're just treading water. Do you want to just tread water? Because that's just not what I would want. So to wrap up this debt one, you really need to focus on financial risk that your debts hold. And your debts are going to come in the form of credit cards, lines of credit. Maybe you got a boat loan. Maybe you got other loans like that. Those are all term loans. But then you're probably sitting on some lines of credit. You might be sitting on a HELOC. And listen, I love lines of credit and I love HELOCs if used properly. But using them properly means we take the money and we send it out to work for us to make a higher interest rate. We want to make a spread. Taking the money from your home equity line of credit to put in a pool doesn't do anything for the bottom line. Taking the money out of your home equity line to fund that vacation does nothing for the bottom line. There's no spread. You're literally treading water with that. So please, look at your debts. Come up with a solution. Watch some of my videos. Subscribe to this channel right here. I put tons of content out showing you how we have helped hundreds of people, if not thousands of people, I might even be safe to say, pay off their debts in the most efficient manner possible without working harder, working longer, or taking on any unnecessary risk. All right, let's move on to number 4. The fourth thing I want to talk about is stockpiling essential supplies. Now, I know this is doomsday stuff, but hey, let's get ready. My wife is notorious for this. I walk into the pantry, I'm like, why do we need all these boxes of water? Why do we have all this pasta? What are we going to do with all this? And she always tells me, you won't be saying that in a time when we need it. And she's right. It's a good idea to have a supply of non-perishable food, water, and other essential supplies on hand in case, an emergency comes up. Another thing too, we just had a big blizzard here. And I didn't know this, but my wife has a stockpile of these lights. They're LED lights, not kind of like a flashlight, but you just pull the top up and you got light. We lost power for days. We had light, we had food, we had matches. My question to you is, are you ready for those things? Hopefully you never need them and they just sit there and you stare at them every day and you look at them and you say, honey, what is all this stuff for? So just like that blizzard I mentioned that we just went through, and that was very recent, there are going to be disruptions. In an economic collapse, one like what is going to be coming, there's going to be a lot of things that could happen. You might go without power. You might go without heat. You might go without a lot of things. Are you prepared and ready? And you know what? Just focus on the things you need to survive, okay? If it gets cold, well, you can layer up. If it gets really warm, well, run around naked. But you can't do anything when there's no food in the house. In the grocery store, either you can't get there, it's closed, or there's no food on the shelves. So stock up, do it a little bit at a time, and get ready for those essential things that we need. Food, water, shelter. And you might as well throw in some flashlights while you're at it. Number 5, stay informed. You got to keep your eyes on the economic news and the trends and be aware of potential risks that that might affect your financial security. Now, this is tough, and I put this in here to talk about, knowing this was going to be a difficult one for me to talk about, because where you get your economic news, where you see the trends and all this, for most of you is the regular news channels. And that news, I'm sorry, most of that stuff's fake. So yes, you can see where the markets are that day, but are you going to get the real guidance that you need? Probably not. I subscribe to some newsletters for some really good economists that I follow and that I like. That's how I stay up on the trends. That's how I stay up on what's actually going on and the things that we're not seeing. We only see what the media wants us to see and what our eyes show us, but there's a lot going on behind the scenes. And you probably would want to know about this too. Now, the beauty is you've got the internet nowadays. So the internet opens up a possibility of lots of things. YouTube. This channel you're watching right now. Oh, by the way, did I ask you to subscribe to this channel? Because this would be a great channel to start paying attention to, because when the whole thing goes, I'm going to be all over it. So YouTube is a great way to stay up on data, up on trends, and up on how you stay prepared, and how, not only how you stay prepared, but how you're going to take action when it's time. Because a lot of people are going to be sitting back saying, oh, is it time? Is it time? Is this the time to take advantage of those opportunities? Well, YouTube and this channel right here is going to put you in the driver's seat. So instead of being in the passenger seat saying, no, pump the brakes, hit the brakes, you're going to be just hit the gas, ready to go. But this is all up to you. It's not me. I can tell you what to do, how to do it, when to do it, but you got to listen and you got to take action. And that's the part that's the most difficult, is the action part. You're getting all the knowledge. You're saying all this stuff all makes logical sense. But are you going to really do this? Are you going to take action on it? Because if I were you, I would take this real serious. Because it's not just me saying this. Why don't you watch some videos by Ray Dalio? Or how about Munger? Or how about Warren Buffett? Or all of them? Or how about diving in and watching a couple of the economists out there? Because they're all saying the same things. Get ready, because it's coming. And it's coming to a theater near you way sooner than you want it to be. Folks, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you take action on some of this. And if you like this one, check this video out. Economic Collapse, My Survival Plan. That video will show you everything else you need to know. Until then, see you next time.